The monk Hegomen Faltaous El Souriany's life in a few lines at the start of the previous century, in the city of Zakazik, more precisely on the street of Magr Mowis, Fisherman's area. There lived a righteous family, who loved God and his church very much. This was the family of Mr. Guirgis Ayoub and his wife Helena Attia. This couple was likened to Zachariah the Priest and his wife Elizabeth, whom the Bible described as both righteous before God, walking in all the commandments and ordinances of the Lord blameless. Luke chapter 1 verse 6, Kamel's family was surrounded by joy and peace. And they were tied together by spiritual love as well as their love for each other. As the days went by, this family was faced with a tribulation, as Helena, Kamel's mother, departed to heaven. She left behind her husband and her 7 young children, their youngest being Kamel, who was between the age of 10 and 12 years. This was a very difficult time for their family. And eventually Mr. Guirgis decided to move to Cairo, where they settled in a town in Shobra close to St. George's Church in Gazirat Bodran. The priest of the church at the time, namely, the late Fr. Guirgis Faltaous, was a righteous man and a good shepherd. When he learned that a new family had moved into the neighborhood, he visited him and he encouraged him to join the church and attend the holy liturgies, and so it was. As time passed by, Kamel became very attached to Father Guirgis, who became his father of confession. Father Guirgis in turn also loved Kamel very much due to his great manners and the fact that he was simply a pleasure to be around. During that time, Kamel was in grade 6, and he continued to go to church in order to attend the holy liturgies as well as Sunday school and hymn lessons. In seeing that Kamel was thriving spiritually, Fr. Guirgis recommended that he be ordained a deacon, and this took place by the holy hands of Pope Ioannis XIX, the 113th Patriarch. After completing his middle school years, Kamel entered high school and he was a true illustration of a pure youth, a youth who was a witness to Christ in humility, love, and tranquility. He was very respected by his peers and he continued to impress his teachers. After he completed his high school education, he earned his diploma. During his youth, Kamel excelled throughout his spiritual life, and was deeply involved in the church. This qualified him to join the church service and become a Sunday school teacher. As well as being assigned a Sunday school class to serve, he began to go about some outreach visits for the children in his neighborhood. Furthermore, Kamel also taught church hymns to a group of young boys at his church. Clearly Kamel was extremely spiritually dynamic and full of life. And this was something that his father of confession, Hegomen Fr. Guirgis Faltaous, noticed. Fr. Guirgis continued to encourage Kamel and he guided him spiritually. He found that Kamel was like fertile soil, that was ready to be planted, and he stood by him throughout all that concerned him. He found that Kamel had a great love for prayer and praise. So he formulated a new spiritual canon that suited Kamel. It consisted of various prayers and praises. Fr. Guirgis instructed him to follow this spiritual canon daily at a certain time in his bedroom at home. Kamel in turn was obedient and he diligently followed his father of confession's advice with regards to his new spiritual canon. He used to pray with all joy, love, and eagerness, to the point where his siblings would stand outside of his room in order to hear him praying, praising, and chanting hymns with his marvelous voice. During that same year, the virtues of Hegomen Fr. Magr Mowis the Solitude, who was later ordained to be the 112th Patriarch, Pope Cyril VI, began to shine. Fr. Mina used to live in a windmill located in Old Cairo. In wanting to take his blessings and learn more about him, Father Guirgis gathered some of the deacons and church servants, among whom was Kamel, and they planned a visit to Father Mina at the windmill. When they arrived at the windmill, Father Mina the Solitude greeted them warmly and he welcomed them all. As he was accustomed to doing, Fr. Mina handed every person a small piece of paper that had a verse from the Holy Bible or one of the sayings of the Desert Fathers written on it. It was also known that whatever was written on each individual's piece of paper would eventually become fulfilled. It was God's Spirit that was guiding Father Mina the Solitude, even until he was ordained Patriarch, the See of St. Mark. As Kamel was seated amongst the servants, Father Mina gave him a piece of paper that had the following verse written on it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world, and loses his own soul? Mark chapter 8 verse 36, after Kamel's first visit to Father Mina the Solitude. Kamel began to visit him on a constant basis and he informed him of his longing for monasticism. Fr. Mina encouraged Kamel to continue down this path, and he provided him with the necessary advice and guidance. Kamel became very attached to Father Mina, and he loved him very much. He used to ask for his advice for many circumstances that were all related to his spiritual life. During one of Kamel's visits to Father Mina, Fr. Mina prophesied to him that he would one day become ordained as one of the Church Fathers. In seeing that Kamel had completed his high school career, he now had two options to choose from. Either he would join the military in order to serve his compulsory time, or he would need to pay a fee if he wanted to be exempted from it. Because Kamel's father was worried about his son and he did not want to part with him, he paid the fee. He didn't want his son to experience the harsh life that the military was notorious for. During that time, Egypt was under the British rule, and the British Army was hiring employees and offering him a handsome salary. It was then that Kamel submitted his documents and he was hired by the British Army. He was assigned to a military base amidst the sea on a large military ship. And he remained there for extended periods of time. Kamel was surrounded by tranquility, and God designed it for him this way. In order to rear him for a life of much greater tranquility, in the desert. In August of the year 1948, Kamel headed to St.Mary's Monastery El Sourian in the Natroun Valley. After he met with His Grace Bishop Faltaous, the monastery's bishop during that time, Kamel was ordained as monk on the day of the 2nd of November 1948 by the hands of His Grace Bishop Faltaous. And he was named the monk, Father Faltaous El Souriany. The monk Fr. Faltaous received the blessing of priesthood towards the end of the year 1949. And later in the year 1951 he was promoted to the rank of Hegomen by the hands of His Grace Bishop Faltaous, the monastery's bishop during that time. Fr. Faltaous lived in solitude in the monastery's fortress for approximately 12 years. He then moved to a cave in a mountain, close to the cave of Fr. Anthony El Souriany, the late Pope Shenouda III, may God repose his soul. He was recruited by His Holiness the late Pope Cyril VI, who was his spiritual father at the time, to renovate St. Mina the Wonderworkers Monastery in Marriott. On the day of 9 September 1970, Bishop Faltaous asked Fr. Faltaous to prepare himself to travel to the Esbawiya in order to serve there for approximately 5 years, and then he returned back to his home monastery. Fr. Faltaous lived in solitude in a cell outside of the monastery's ancient ruins. This cell was built for him by Father Faltaous El Souriany, who was later ordained to be His Holiness Pope Shenouda III, May God repose his soul. This is the cell in which our righteous father, Hegomen Faltaous El Souriany, lived in, until his departure to heaven. The monastery decided to plan a Golden Jubilee celebration in order to recognize Fr. Faltaous El Souriany, for his 50 years of monasticism. The celebration took place on the day of 7 November 1998. The festivities took place within the walls of the ancient monastery, on the eastern side. The celebration was attended by His Holiness Pope Shenouda III, as well as other church dignitaries. Bishops, the monks of the monastic council of the Sourian monastery, and monks who came to attend from other monasteries in the Natrun Valley. Fr. Faltaous El Souriany was the first monk in our era, to whom Pope Shenouda III awarded the Holy Eskim, and this occurred on Saturday 29 March 2003, on Sunday February 11, 2008. The monastery celebrated the passage of 60 years in monasticism for Father Faltaous El Souriany, on the dawn of 17 March 2010 at around 3:30 a.m. Amidst the ringing of the church bells for the midnight praises, Father Faltaous' pure soul departed from his body, to the paradise of joy among the angels and the souls of the saints. The funeral prayers took place in St. Mary's Church inside the monastery. The funeral was attended by a multitude of monks from the surrounding monasteries. Fr. Faltaous was laid to rest in the monastery's designated monks' burial site. God granted Fr. Faltaous many virtues, amongst them were the gifts of spiritual revelation, spiritual transparency, and the performing of miracles, including other gifts. He was illuminated by these gifts both during his life on earth, and even after he departed to heaven. On Tuesday, May 5, 2015, Fr. Faltaous El Souriany's pure body was transferred from the monk's burial site to a shrine that was built in his name, located in Pope Cyril VI Church. In a grand procession that was led by His Grace Bishop Meteris, the monastery's abbot, along with a multitude of our fathers the Hegomens, priests, and monks, Fr. Faltaous was laid to rest in his shrine, and joy encircled the whole monastery. May his holy and pure prayers be with us all. Amen.